I can see your slides. Yes, please
Awesome.
go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. And thank all of you for attending. Good morning to those of you in the US and good afternoon or evening to those of you in Europe. So today, the focus of my talk is going to be about Agile and estimating Agile projects, and about the fact that just because your project is Agile is not necessarily a cost driver. That would be my premise. Hold on. So this is just the standard slide about price systems. We do cost analytics. We have a suite of products that full soup to nuts cost analytics. That's enough about that. I have worked at Price. This will be, in fact, June 25th was my 37th year anniversary at Price Systems. I lead the cost developing cost estimating models with software estimating. I often speak at conferences. I see a software technology conference when they used to have that, and other conferences. So on to the purpose of this talk. The agenda for today's talk, I will start with a brief introduction. What's the motivation? Why am I even talking about this? I'll talk a little bit about Agile development, and I imagine most of the attendees are pretty savvy with Agile, so I'm not going to go into too great detail, but I like to make sure to set the context because Agile means different things to different people. Then I'll talk about some methodologies and rules of thumb. I'm in the cost estimating business. I specialize in software. I have a lot of people come to me and ask me questions. Well, I'm doing an Agile project, or my development team is telling me that they're doing an Agile project. How does that make my estimate different? And there is not a single answer to that question, because when someone says they're being Agile, they often mean, if 10 people tell you they have an Agile project, they have 10 different definitions of specifically how they're applying Agile practices. So rather than having a cookbook for how to estimate an Agile project, we've developed methodologies and rules of thumb. Also, I'll talk about some of the cost driver considerations. If your development team, if you're an estimator and your development team starts telling you that they're doing an Agile project and none of the rules apply, first of all, some of the rules do apply, but there are also specific questions that you as an estimator might want to ask when your development team says they're being Agile, or when your program management says it's an Agile project. There's specific questions that you might want to ask to help you frame the estimate to take advantage of the use of Agile best practices. And then we'll wrap it up. So Agile is something that has been evolving for many years as a, I guess, best practice, you might call it, for software development, or at least for some types of software development. It's enabled organizations to deliver quality software that is intended to and has succeeded in many cases to optimize customer satisfaction. So Agile processes do rely on highly skilled developers who communicate with each other and with the client and with the project stakeholders in a way to optimize the value that gets delivered with the software project. So this does require a mind shift during project planning, both from the perspective of the development teams and from the consumers of the end application. So from a purely Agile perspective, estimation might not make sense, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. A project that is purely Agile, you know how many iterations you have, you know how many people you have on the team, you know what the delivery date is. It's simple math, but it doesn't work that way in most cases. From a business or program perspective, estimation is still important. And even in the case where there's a purely Agile process, there are still customer expectations. If you're delivering software to a customer, there's still customer expectations, and it certainly makes sense to bounce customer expectations against what the team believes they can deliver in a set period of time. So there's always a reason that you there's not always, there is often, more often than not, a reason that estimation is an important part of project planning, even if the project is agile. Sorry, I'm having a problem. Okay, there we go. Okay, little history on Agile. Software development was not originally treated as an engineering discipline. It was sort of some combination of art, science, some creativity, and a little bit of black magic. How did you make that work? But technology improved. People started to embrace software as an engineering discipline, or at least as a scientific, as a computer science discipline. But as technology improved, the complexity of software developments, the expectations of what software development projects could deliver increased. And there were a lot of starts and stops. There were failures. The industry needed to step back and take a breath. So lots and lots of projects, software projects, spiraled out of control because so many software projects spiraled out of control. And what you see down here just is a timeline of, where we started and where we are today. So very briefly, the Agile Manifesto. A bunch of smart guys, smart people, software developers got together and decided that, a lot of the formal methods, a lot of the very stringent controls that started to fall over software projects to rein in this failure went too far. So we're discovering better ways of developing software. Individuals and favoring, not throwing the things to the right away, but favoring individuals and interactions over processes and tools, favoring working software over lots of documentation, embracing customer collaborations rather than contract negotiations, and expecting and embracing change. And all Agile projects adhere to this manifesto. But this manifesto isn't, it doesn't dictate the processes or the tools or anything. It's an overarching umbrella philosophy. All Agile projects share a common set of principles. Every Agile project uses a unique set of Agile practices to implement these principles. And it's all based on the project, the team. Successful estimation for an Agile project is like successful estimation for any software project. You, the estimator, the person in charge of doing the project plan, needs to understand the properties of the project and the practices that are employed. So some of the basic concepts: Agile software development creates usable chunks of software developed in short periods of time that the customer gets visibility of on a regular basis. Requirements are translated into user stories or the equivalent of user stories, and they become the project backlog. This is all the things the customer will want. We're going to put them all on a big list. We're going to let the customer prioritize that list, and we're going to let the customer reprioritize that list on a regular basis. So user stories deliver business value, and they're small enough to complete in an iteration. So an iteration or a sprint, it could be a 2-week, it could be a 4-week. It's decided by the team, and it's used to help the team create a regular cadence of delivering usable software. Every iteration, the user is focusing on whatever stories are the highest priority of the customer at that time. Priorities are going to shift from iteration to iteration. A customer might see a feature that they asked for and decide that it's more important to make improvements to that feature based on what they've seen and what the possibilities they see having seen that. And they may decide that some other stories get lower on the priority and may not potentially be in the end delivery. And Agile teams like that. They like the fact that they're working with their customer. They like the fact that they embrace the fact that change is part of the process. Some common Agile practices: Now, as I said before, every Agile project is different, but some common Agile practices include pair programming, where no production code is developed without two sets of eyes on it. Continuous integration with automated testing, so that as people check new code into the system, there's a build kicked off, automated testing occurs. It's quick and easy to find places where new code is breaking old code. Test-driven development, tests are built before code is developed, and enough code, but not any more, is developed to pass that test. Regular communication, daily stand-up meetings or daily face-to-face meetings. Teams are often co-located. Refactoring is an important part of, if you touch code, make it better than it was when you got there. Releases are small. The customer interacts regularly with the team. And simplicity is a common Agile practice. So this is my favorite way of getting the point across. To me, this gets the point across, that the fact that your project is Agile is not necessarily a cost driver, because if you look at this, what looks like there are many different implementations of Agile that involve lots of different kinds of practices. There's definitely overlap between the different kinds, but definitely, if you tell me your project is Agile, I can't tell you that it's going to take 100,000 hours to complete it. I need more information. So that's a basic overview of Agile. I'm going to talk now about estimating for Agile. So estimating Agile software projects. So in general, there's a conundrum around all software estimation that when the first estimate is required, information is incomplete. It's unclear on exactly what the end deliverable is going to be. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's uncertain what the end deliverable is going to be. It's uncertain what specific features are part of, like the the MVP, and the minimum viable product, sorry. And there's also information that's incomplete about what team is going to work on this, what resources are going to be available. So it's important, whether the project is Agile or not, that there's a good understanding of the project from a technical perspective. What are the team parameters? Like any other software estimate, just because the project is Agile doesn't mean there's a cookie cutter formula for coming up with the estimate. Because in general, when people say their projects are Agile, they're not 100% Agile, at least in my experience. So when the development team says, they declare agility, how is the estimator supposed to respond? First of all, if the team is truly Agile, and I said this up front, it's like utopian Agile. I forget where I got that reference, but I like it. So utopian Agile really does absolutely follow the Agile Manifesto. There's a schedule. I've got 6 months to complete this project. I understand I have a backlog. My customer understands that we're going to do 2-week iterations, and that at the end of the schedule, we're going to deliver as much as we can get developed in that time period based on their interface with the team and their reprioritizing, maybe adding new requirements, eliminating some of the backlog. If it's truly Agile, then you know how long it's going to take, you know how many people are on the team. It's math. Most Agile teams aren't quite that Agile, especially in the government space, and a lot of my customer base is in the government space. Program is likely going to be held to some or all of the following. There are going to be schedule constraints. There is going to be potentially a firm fixed price, and there's some set of fixed requirements, the minimum viable product. So you can't be completely Agile and have these 2 or 3 of these constraints as well. There's there's a hybrid sense to your agility. So the second category of Agile teams are those who have chosen to apply Agile best practices, but they're doing it within some set of constraints either of a government contract or other acquisition mandates. So saying that the project team is Agile doesn't exactly tell you how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. So at the far left, the truly Agile team, the utopian Agile team, you know the team size, you know how long your iterations or your sprints are, you know what the delivery date is, you understand what the cadence is expected to be, and you understand what set of Agile practices, is it Scrum, is it XP, are being employed. So conversations between the Agile team and the developer. So the estimator's job really becomes applying estimation methodology to what is known about the expected scheduling capability, taking into account the effects of specific Agile practices, and I'll talk about them a little later. And then the estimator's job at this point is to offer the Agile team and other decision makers advice about whether or not, based on the capability that's expected and the amount of time that it's expected to be delivered in, whether the schedule is feasible and what is the risk of being able to deliver the expected capability. And in this case, because if there are variances between the two estimates, with knowing when it's due and how many people you have working, and the estimate based on some estimating methodology besides just mathematics, it should stimulate discussion and lead to better convergence. So even a truly Agile team should take advantage of an estimating team when one is available, because it's a good sounding board. So the other end of the spectrum, this is the case where an organization is applying Agile best practices, some set of Agile best practices, but is working within acquisition or government contract limitations. So at this point, what is known are what capabilities are required, what schedule constraints there are, and once again, discussion between the Agile team and the development and the estimators, I should say estimators, sorry, between the Agile team and the estimators, what Agile practices are being employed. At this point, the estimator's job is not different than a traditional estimate. They look at what capability needs to be delivered. They look at what schedule expectations there are. They evaluate the team. They evaluate the impact of specific Agile practices, and they create an estimate of the cost and schedule. So the advantage in this scenario, Agile teams should have collected significant metrics. So one of the great things about Agile best practices are they often create a culture of metrics collection. Agile teams know what their velocity is. They know how much they can get done in any given iteration. And over time, a team that's worked together develops a good cadence and a good understanding of the overall capability of the team's ability to deliver things, and the team's ability to look at a user story, talk amongst themselves, and come to quick convergence on how much effort or how much time or how many iterations it's going to take to implement a certain capability. So the fact that the Agile team is comfortable with their predictions and makes it possible for, once again, those conversations. If traditional estimating methodology comes up with a large discrepancy between what the Agile team thinks, it's a discussion. It creates a conversation that improves the estimation and improves the Agile team's ability. They can learn from the estimating team can learn from the Agile team, and should lead to convergence. So just, excuse me, the difference between traditional Waterfall and Agile is just the focus on the value that's driven by the user. In the Agile world, your cost, your quality, your schedule are fixed, and the scope is variable. In the traditional Waterfall, scope and quality are fixed. Your schedule and costs tends to be variable. So from an estimator's perspective, there are concerns. Size, we continue to consider size, whether it be function points or cosmic function points or source lines of code. Size is still a significant driver in cost in a software project. And though in a truly agile project, size is negotiable, there is a starting place. There's that MVP. Teams can calibrate their size. They can figure out how many function points or how many source lines of code they deliver with each story point and use that as a communication tool with the estimators. Estimators are concerned about the Agile team. How big is the Agile team? What is their known velocity? How many story points can they deliver in a typical iteration? How long are iterations and what is the release cycle? How often do we make a release to the customer? With Agile projects and with people employing Agile best practices, it is typical to regularly deliver working software to the customers, to the end users, to increase the value of that feedback loop. So other things that are important in any estimate include things like any software development, information about the team, are they about the project itself, who is the customer, how easy or hard is the customer to work with, what other external factors might impact the project. Those are also important things, whether the project is agile or not. So the estimator's job will become determining whether the schedule is feasible based on their estimating expertise, figuring out how many iterations they believe are required based on what they know about the Agile team and the iteration length, and understanding the uncertainty around proposed capability. So how likely is it that this team in that time can deliver at least the minimum viable product? So a couple other things that you want to think about are, what are the cost drivers in my estimation model or in my estimation methodology? What are the cost drivers that I might want to think a little harder about because the project is agile? So there are potential implications of embracing agile best practices that increase productivity. Not everyone who embraces agile does it to increase productivity. Some do it to increase quality. Some do it to increase both quality and productivity. And different teams find different places where agile works for them, agile practices work for them and don't work for them. So part of the job of an estimation team, it's not, I say, you tell me you're agile, that doesn't help me estimate your project. You tell me you're agile, it doesn't tell me how to estimate your project. It tells me there's a set of questions I want to ask you about how you're implementing agile and what agile means to you. So some of the things you want to think about, agile teams do tend to be highly skilled. It is hard to be a slacker in an agile environment. You're co-located with your coworkers, your pair programming sometimes. It can't be on Amazon while everyone else on the team is working on a specific problem because everybody's going to know it. And agile teams tend to drive each other to their limits. Having highly skilled teams means learning curve is good for new members. New members of the team quickly come up to speed. So if part of your cost estimation methodology includes indicating team experience, chances are good that an agile team is above average on the skill set. Agile teams also tend to have tools that are quite sophisticated. So especially true, on teams where they're integrating agile practices into things that are real time or safety critical, because a good tool set greatly facilitates compliance to standards, but also just the fact that with Agile you develop a cadence, you collect regular metrics, you keep track of what the team does on a regular basis, you have all your stories in Jira or some other Agile planning tool. So you have good tool sets, and good tool sets tend to increase productivity among software development teams, teams in general. Co-locations of teams should improve productivity, and it's an interesting thing given the last year and a half where in my shop, our co-located teams stopped being co-located, but continue to be very virtually connected. But the co-location of teams should improve team productivity. And I like to call it the culture of interruption, because when everyone on the team is in the same room and somebody blurts something out, it distracts other people. But it also means that questions get answered in real time. It also increases the cohesion of the team. And I found, because I work on a team that applies Agile practices, and I've found that over time you get good at completely toning out the interruptions that don't relate to you and honing in quickly on things where you see you can add value or where you have similar questions that can be answered. Co-locating with stakeholders and subject matter experts with a development team also creates a real-time IPT, a product team, an integrated product team. Well-run stand-up meetings increase productivity because people eliminate, they give team members a chance to eliminate boundaries. So cost drivers, if you have a methodology, is it spread over multiple time zones? Cost drivers should be considered to be on the high side, not the low side, as far as ease of communication within the team. One of the things that I think, huge quality increaser. I think it's a great Agile practice, and probably was a practice long before Agile was a thing, but continuous integration with automated testing. It should include, it absolutely improves delivery, productivity, and quality. So code gets checked in regularly, excuse me, builds are run and tests regularly run before the developer forgets what changes they made. Red tests raise flags. The team, the number one job of the team is to fix the red tests, fix the tests that fail before going forward. And what's good about that is, little code has changed because you're running a build once a day or twice a day or whatever. So only part of the team is checked in new code. It's easy to identify it. The developers still remember what it is they did and why they did it. Fixes occur quickly. So cost drivers that are focused on estimating the integration and test effort, the complexity of that integration and test effort goes down, as compared to a waterfall situation where 6-8 months transpire before all the code is brought together and tested. So basically, that's what I had to say, and I think I might go 1 minute over, but I'll try to keep it to that. I think the Agile paradigm is here to stay, and I think that the Agile paradigm is an awesome paradigm, even in cases where the complete Agile Manifesto doesn't apply. But the practices that the Agile paradigm has brought to our industry, I think, have added a ton of value to software development projects across the board. There's NASA projects that aren't 100% Agile. They're a hybrid. They definitely have to invest in front-end requirements and documentation, but they apply many Agile practices to increase their productivity, increase the quality of the projects that they deliver. And I just use NASA as an example, but across the aerospace and defense industry, where Agile projects might not be 100%, you might not be able to achieve utopian Agile, you certainly have the opportunity to take advantage of the value that Agile brings to the community. Estimators need, from an estimation perspective, estimators need to understand what Agile means, and Agile means different things to different development teams and different things in different industries. So you have to understand it in the context of the project that's being estimated, in the context of the teams that are working on the project, and in the context of the Agile practices that are being utilized on the project. So the fact that your project is Agile, it's not necessarily a cost driver, but it should start a conversation about how Agile practices may influence your cost. And I believe my contact information is here. I believe that Eric's going to send out the presentations or post the presentations on the, Eric can tell you where they are, but Eric has the presentation. But you can also feel free to take down my contact information if you have questions that I don't get to answer today.
Okay, thanks a lot, Arlene, for your presentation.